Hello everyone, and welcome in. It's so good to see you all. My gosh, hello Lauren, hello Desu, congratulations on your murder shovel, and welcome to the team. We're glad to have you. Hello Sanchez, welcome in. Hello Tiny, of course. Hello Florida man, you live, it's good to see you. Good to see you there. Hello, guys. Thank you for that lurk. Hello, Wraithy Girl. Welcome in. Hello, Rogan Breaker. And hello, Leo. How is everyone today? And Rogan, there's always time for tea. Indeed, there is. Yum. So, you guys, we have a very special stream today, and I'm super excited to get into it. So, let's start off right away, nice, quick and in a hurry, with our question of the day. And today's question of the day was submitted by Wundersnell, which is, what is your greatest fear? What is your greatest fear? This is what I would very much like to know today from all of you. Hello, Cyan Drago. Welcome in. It's good to see you. Be careful. Crashes in through the nearest window, getting impaled by numerous shards of glass. We're going to have to wrap you in bubble wrap as well, apparently. Not just Florida man. Half-Hurricane says heights, centipedes, and body mutilation. You know what? Those are fair. Those are very fair. Very fair. Sanchez, not being remembered. It's my key to immortality. That sounds like... I think it's a Mexican belief. I think that was the entire premise behind a recent movie, wasn't it? Your biggest fear is truly being alone in the unforgiving world that we live in. That's a decent fear. Foxy, thank you. Thank you so much for that tier 3 subscription. 3 months, you absolute legend, you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And welcome in, Darth. It's good to see you. And we're getting raided by Mr. Rumbled Roses. Hello. Welcome in, and welcome to all of the Rumble Maniacs. Welcome in, it's so good to see you. How are you? How was your stream? And while I'm waiting for that answer, I'm just going to have a cup of tea in your honour. There we go, and I'm just going to put my teacup right here. I'm sure nothing bad will happen with it at all. Look how stable it is. I'm sure it's fine. I am sure that it's fine. Hello, big dummy. Hello, mate. Welcome in. It's so nice to see you. Welcome back. It's been a while. It's been quite a while. You're currently trying to get Unity to work on your computer. Best of luck. Everything I understand about Unity says it's a pain in the butt. Answer to the question of the day. You have severe thalassophobia. I confess, I don't know that one. That's a new one on me. Big dummy, right now we are answering our question of the day. Which was submitted by the wonderful Wondersnell, a member of this fantastic community. And the question of the day is, what is your greatest fear? Ryan Breaker says, large spinning blades, watching parasites crawl out of my living skin, and an ever-present fear that I'll leave this world without ever leaving an impactful mark. Fair enough. Fair enough. Those are quite understandable fears. Wondersnell, I went to a mental asylum and saw some guy rambling about Earl Gay, twinings, and other stuff. Pure insanity. There we go. There we go. And to answer your question, P, I don't blame you because Dia de los Muertos is around the corner. But yeah, something like that. There we go. I confess I don't know very much about that belief system or anything really at all about Dia de los Muertos. It's not really ever been something that affected me personally, being Irish. You know, it's not my heritage, it's not my culture, and I've not really been in a place where it was ever a big deal. But I would definitely be interested in learning more about it. If you'd like to share, please do so on the Discord. Also, whoever Rogue Meatwad is in the Discord, are you alright, man/madam? So, you know, I have talked to Rogue Meatwad since Saturday. He is doing much better. He had a bit of a bout with his stomach going on, but he's doing well. He is doing just fine. And if you're not following him on Twitch, it is twitch.tv/Rogue Meatwad. I am sure he would love for you to pop in and say hello. But he is doing quite alright today. Thank you for asking. Onyx the Gaming Machine, heights or deep water? That's fair. That's fair. Deep water is scary, especially when you have no idea what's down there and what's underneath. Cyan Drogo, thalassophobia is a fear of deep, murky water. That's fair. That is quite fair. That makes a lot of sense. Obsidian, mine's probably just general things I can't control. Fair enough. Fair enough. Darth, your biggest fear is being all alone without any friends or support. Well, I'm happy to tell you, for all of those who your greatest fear is being alone, you're never alone. We're always here. Feel free to join the Discord. Lots of lovely people that are there day and night because we're all across different time zones. So there's always someone to talk to. You're never quite alone. Never quite alone. Hello, Sister Rose. Welcome in. Welcome in. It's good to see you. Funder, I have a question and a possible redeem suggestion. Would you consider adding a redeem for 500 sides where you speak a phrase in the other language that you speak at times? No. No, I would not consider that redeem, Funder. I would not. I don't quite like the idea of having to do translations on the spot, especially when I've had enough tea. Because the last thing that I want is to just be sitting here and be like, gosh damn it, what is the word for slipper? Or something like that. It's the last thing I need to do. What is your fear, P? Says Sanchez. Well, my greatest fear, and I know that it sounds silly because it's entirely irrational. It is. My greatest fear is clowns. Now, not the scary clowns, not the evil clowns or the psycho clowns. You know, I have no fear of ICP and I love Stephen King's It. No, my fear are the happy clowns. The ones with the happy painted smiles and the dead eyes that are just always so cheerful all the time, no matter what happens. And my fear, the actual wording, J of the 10, thank you, thank you. So my actual fear about the happy clowns is because you never know when one of them is going to snap and pull out a fucking bazooka. They're just too happy, it's unnatural. They're going to snap at some point. And I don't want to be around when it happens. That is what my fear, my greatest fear is. Thank you for asking. Thank you. So, you guys, Aye, big dunny. There's always time for tea. Indeed there is. I shall take care of that right now. So I am Trogo. While I'm not scared of clouds themselves, I am deeply unnerved by people in mascot costumes. That's fair. That's quite fair, you know? You kind of wish you got the Pennywise dancing clown for your costume earlier. I'm not afraid of Pennywise. I know he's an evil clown. I'm not afraid of scary, like the scary creepy clowns or anything that's obviously psychotic. It's really just the genuinely happy ones with the big shoes. And like the red noses and the flowers on their chest that squirt out water, they freak me out. Freak me out. So you guys, today, of course, is another Morbidity and Mythos Monday. And I am super, super excited. It was so much fun 2 weeks ago, going through some HP Lovecraft with you guys. And tonight, we have another creepy tale to read to you guys. And I really hope that you will like this one. It is not by a famous artist. In fact, this is a creepypasta that I have written myself. I have written it myself. I hope you like it. I hope you do. It is not incredibly graphic. There's no blood and gore or anything like that. But rather, I chose to try to focus on some existential horror. So tonight for you guys, I have an original creepypasta for you. What do you think? What do you think? Would you guys like to hear it? Hello, Iro! Hello! The day I dropped my tea. That is beautiful, Cyan. That is beautiful. I encourage you to please write a creepypasta about me and the day that I dropped my tea. I'd love it. I would absolutely love that. Please do. Please share it on the Discord if you do. That'd be amazing. That'd be so awesome. Alright, you guys. So, as normal when I'm doing these kinds of streams, I'm going to turn off. Thank you, Iro. Thank you so much for that frivolity. I appreciate it. Welcome in. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you? As usual with these streams, during them I am going to turn off the frivolity redeems, just so that we don't have any interruptions to the tale that ruins the immersion for anyone. So if you have any frivolity redeems that you'd like to get out of the way, please get them out of your system now. If not, you can feel they'll be back after the tale. Additionally, if you have any other redeems that you would like to redeem today, when I am reading the tale, the only ones that I will be fulfilling while reading is going to be the There's Always Time for Tea redeems. And that is only when I do need a drink, if I do need one. Any redeems that are redeemed after that will be, I will take care of them after the tale for you, which is no problem. And thank you so much, Rogan, for that frivolity and wonder. There's always time for tea. Indeed there is. Yum. Oh, you did! You put a top hat on top of the T-Rex outside your neighbour's house. That is amazing. That is amazing. Wrong redeem, no worry, the moderators will return your seeds to you, don't worry, they'll refund that for you, not a problem, not a problem. Once you get him a monocle and a teacup, I expect pictures, Hiro, I very much do. If you get him a monocle and a teacup, Wonder, for the next Morbid Monday, can I suggest one I wrote a few years ago? It's short and a little messed up, but I think it could be good. Feel free to go ahead and submit that on the Discord, Wonder, and I'll look it over. I'll look it over. But for now, you guys, I am going to throw up the Be Right Back screen. What? Thank you, Jay. Thank you for that run command. I appreciate it. I am going to throw up the Be Right Back screen for just a moment while I set up our ambience, and we shall get into our tale. So, grab your blankets, grab your cups of tea, get ready to settle in for what I hope is a tale that you will really enjoy. If you hear voices from the attic, run. They tell me today is September 27th, 2001, but that can't be right. I know! It's April 30th, 2020. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to fight against the darkness. The swirling shadows that once seemed to be so far away, but now twist and whip across my vision, close enough to snuff out all of the light that my weary and bloodshot eyes might take in. I don't know even if I will have time enough to finish telling this tale before my time runs out. It's not as if there's a ticking clock that marks the passage of time, or gives me clear warning of how many more times my heart might beat before it stills at last. There's only my laptop, sitting at 33% battery life, the ever-curling smoke-like wisps of anti-light, and the ever-present whispers that fill in my ears, sometimes louder, barely audible, depending on which way I turn my head. They whisper the most horrific things, not graphic descriptions of my own demise, nor tales against my loved ones, nor promises of endless pain and torture that conjure images of fire and brimstone. No, they're far more insidious than that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. As I sit, cross-legged on the cold cement of my basement floor, dying laptop across my thighs, I've decided surely what has happened here. Any attempts to do so before now only resulted in a litany of diagnoses from the so-called medical and mental health professionals, several stints in my local medical institution, and a mountain of medical debt that I shall never be able to pay off, even if I were to survive the night. At least, all of the pointless sessions and perpetually inconvenient appointments left me with a cocktail of drugs that will make my last hours upon this earth somewhat enjoyable. To anyone that reads this, I urge you to believe that I am not, as the doctors have insisted, ill of mind, nor am I the sort to actively seek out attention from others. The fact is that it was my desire to be left alone that brought me to this place, and, ultimately, my doom. I don't know if anyone will ever find these words, but I hope that maybe, just maybe, if you find yourself in my position, they might serve to save you. Not that I know how to save myself. But my failures might save you valuable time. For time, I have learned in stark contrast, is the most valuable thing in the world. And also, with my purpose clear, let me tell you the horrors that await anyone unfortunate enough to stumble across what I have. I am a writer, or rather, I was a writer before all of this began. I had a small apartment in a large building of similar apartments in the middle of the bustling metropolis that is New York City. It was my shining little bubble of light and comfort. Outside my walls and windows, the smog and grime that littered the city walls and poisoned the air were replaced by warm lamps and the subtle scents that wafted through my little rooms thanks to a little aromatherapy pod that I had picked up on clearance a few years ago. Sure, the walls were thin, and every morning and evening at 6:04 sharp, the train would pass by my window, nearly close enough to touch if I were to reach my fingers through the thick metal bars welded over them from the outside. And gunshots were as common as raindrops, but the rent was cheap, and heavy curtains could block out the world, along with the ever-present noise-cancelling headphones that I wore morning, noon, and night when I was at home. I was, therefore, relatively happy with my little life. Though I was able to find work as a writer from time to time, and had published a couple of books to small success, I still found the need to take a job at a local diner to make ends meet. It wasn't, all in all, a terrible setup. The diner was a quick 5-minute walk from my apartment, a little hole in the wall with perpetually greasy countertops, no matter how much bleach we laid down, and the smell of burnt toast and old coffee lingering in the air, the worn plastic-topped booth seats. You know the sort. The clientele was minimal but familiar, and the work was easy enough and steady besides, and the chips were nothing to scoff at. And though I had long fantasised about moving away from the city, maybe buying a little cabin set away from the nearest town, where my windows would show the surrounding forest, and blessed silence, where I might spend my days in peace waxing poetic on the page, it was more of a daydream than any active quest of mine. Until the day he arrived, that is. I remember the day well. It was a late afternoon in the autumn, where the crisp winds of October drifted through the alleys, bringing the slightest hint of scent from the trees beyond the city, drifting down and over the mountains and hills from the northeast, before being washed over with the pungent smell of grime and decay from the city. It might have been the first week of October, as I had yet to be paid my bi-weekly cheque, and was carefully tracking my tips, as I do, to decide if the night would be another macaroni and cheese night, or if I might be lucky enough to splurge on a frozen pizza from the market down the street, when the front door of the diner opened violently, the wind outside no doubt taking the patron by surprise, and sending the little silver bell above the door to ringing with its familiar tinny sound, whipped up to a fever pitch as the gusts blew around, making the various flyers on the corkboard dance beneath their thumbtacks. It's almost funny now, looking back, how annoyed I had been at the bell of her chiming as it rested back into place, and the man finally managed to close the door, and stillness swept back over the place. It was a Wednesday, and the lunch crowd, if the handful of senior citizens we saw every afternoon could ever really be called a crowd, had cleared out already, and the diner stood empty, but ready for the small trickle of diners that would make their way in. One of the things that I liked about this job was that I was more than welcome to sit on a stool with my laptop and clicked away at my keyboard, penning my next manuscript or combing through my notes for my latest ghostwriting contract. And so I was when the door opened and the gust of air blew through the little diner. Dutifully, I closed my laptop and stood to greet the patron, screwing on a happy, welcoming smile as I turned towards him. He seemed, at first glance, to be rather ordinary, maybe 5'8", in height with grey hair, a slightly stooped posture, in a charcoal grey suit. Nothing about him really stood out, except, of course, for his eyes. They were brilliantly blue, reflecting the light of the diner in a way that would have made any fashion model jealous. I greeted the man and offered him a seat, either at the bar or in a booth, whichever he preferred. He smiled, a weary sort of smile, as though the weight of the world were attached to the corners of his mouth, and took a seat on a stool. I sighed inside a little, for I knew this business well enough in my 6 years of working here. When someone wants to be alone, to get work done, or if they're with a companion, they opt for a booth. But when they want to talk, they always sit at the bar. So much for getting back to my manuscript. I crossed around through the little lifting gate and bustled around behind the counter with a few automatic practice motions and set a glass of ice water down in front of him, along with a paper placemat, an emptied coffee cup, napkin, straw, spoon and fork. Just the way it goes. "Would you like a menu?" I asked helpfully. The menu was, of course, written out on a large chalkboard on the wall behind the counter where he sat, but older customers tend to prefer the thick, black books with the laminated pages. Better for their eyesight, I suppose. "No!" "Thank you," he whispered, and I did my best not to be alarmed by his response, for it was as though he was having trouble gauging the volume of his voice. The first word had been shouted, though not angrily, followed by what were barely more than whispers. I pulled my order book and pen from my apron, flipping it open and at the ready, doing my best to ignore the strangeness. After all, strange was nothing new in a little place like this. "All right, what can I get you?" I asked, just as pleasant and calm as ever. "Ham and eggs with toast, wheat bread, and can I please have some orange juice with my coffee? No creamer." Again, he alternated between shouting at the top of his lungs and whispering in a raspy voice as though the decades of whatever condition he had caused him to lose control of the volume of his voice and had damaged his vocal cords, the air acting like broken glass in his throat. I gave him a soft smile, my heart going out to him for what he must have been through. It can't have been easy, living with whatever it was he had. "Absolutely. Coming right up," I said with a forced cheerfulness that I did not truly feel, and felt he could use, as I passed the ticket through the service window to the cook, Barney, and set about pouring his coffee and bringing him orange juice and a bowl of sugar packets. As I set them down, he smiled, silently, and I noticed for the first time that his grey hair must have once been black. For there, at the roots of the strands, was a deep pigment, just a few millimetres in length, growing from his scalp at the end of each strand. It looked rather like when my ex-girlfriend had dyed her hair platinum blonde one summer, just as the roots of her natural chestnut brown were beginning to grow back out. An odd effect, to be certain. Who would dye their hair grey? Wasn't it normally the other way around? I said nothing and moved to lean into the service window to watch Barney work, stealing glances at the man as he sat there in silence, his eyes shifting about, looking at something unseen, in the way that I had seen all too often with her older customers, as dementia sets in, shortly before they stop returning to the diner. The realisation that they probably died not too long after had hit me one night, about 8 months into my employment here, and I was racked with agony. At this point, though, I had learned to simply think they moved away to a beautiful retirement community in Florida somewhere, sunshine and shuffleboard, and did their crosswords and ate their gravy-laden pot roast and burned corned beef hash at another diner closer by. It made it easier. For a brief moment, I worried whether the man had any money on him, or whether I would end up paying for his meal. But as Barney put the finished plate of food up in the window for me, I realised it didn't matter. It never had before now. There had been a handful of occasions over the years where I ended up footing the bill for a diner that had forgotten their wallet in confusion, or else the few that had wandered in off the street thinking it was still 1952, or something similar. I fixed my smile back into place and delivered his food while kissing thoughts of that frozen pizza goodbye, and wondering weedily which dried spices I was going to add to my 99-cent box of macaroni and cheese tonight, in a vague attempt to give it some variety. To my surprise, as I laid the plate down, the man withdrew $100 bill from his pocket and extended it with a hand trembling slightly, as I had come to expect from aged customers. "You can keep the change," he half whispered, half shouted, and I took the bill from his hand. He picked up his fork and knife and began carefully laying the napkin in his lap, prim and proper as we had ever seen. "Thank you," I said with delight as I turned to the register to ring up the sale. "I might even get one of those rising crust frozen pizzas tonight," I remember thinking. When I turned back to the man, his plate was entirely empty, as if it had been licked clean while my back was turned. So too was the glass of orange juice empty, and the water glass as well. I did my best to hide my surprise, and asked simply if he would like more coffee. He nodded, pushing his cup towards me, and I poured him another cup. I don't normally start conversations, you see, but after such a generous tip, I felt obliged. "My, you are pretty hungry, huh? Is there anything else that I can get you?" I asked as I picked the plate up off the counter to get it out of his way. He shook his head no immediately, and then paused, before nodding yes after all. "You could tell me your name," he half whispered, half shouted again. It did not have as much of an effect on me as the stark realisation, looking at his face, that the man was not in fact old at all, or rather that I was able to see what he looked like while young, just buried under a layer of loose and wrinkled skin on his face, so noticeable it was a wonder that I hadn't assumed him to be wearing special effects makeup. That's when it hit me. He must be a method actor for one of the shows or movies being shot about the city. I heard of this sort of thing happening before, and it would explain the poorly dyed hair and the weird affectation, and the rather generous tip. I smiled, somewhat relieved at my own folly, and stretched out my hand. And Iro, there's always time for tea. Going to take that right now. Name's Charlie. Charlie B. Finnegan. I smiled warmly as he tentatively stretched his hand out towards my own, his shaking softly in a very good affectation of what I had seen of the older patrons, and placed it in mine. I marvelled at the feel of it. His hand was soft, with skin that felt as thin as paper, draped loosely over the bones of his gnarled fingers, just as many of my customers' hands felt. "Carmichael," he said. "George Carmichael." Pleasantries exchanged, he soon launched into telling me about his life, and I happily stood by, leaning my forearms against the counter to listen. I've always appreciated a good story, you see, and getting the backstory of this character bound for the big screen before anyone else held me in quite a rapture, though he never would say what movie he was involved in, despite my asking several times. He had been a broker for a large hedge fund in the heart of New York, penthouse suite large corner office, 5-star hotel stays around the world when meeting with clients. The whole shebang. Living in the ivory tower of high finance and beautiful women, when he had lost it all, he said. He made a bad deal, lost millions for his clients. In and out of rehab for the liquor that he had used to drown his sorrows after he lost his position, his penthouse, his cars, his entire life. Broke, disgraced, and with nowhere else to go, his uncle, in New Hampshire, the only family he had left, had offered him respite in his little cabin up there. He had taken him up on the offer, using the last of his available funds to buy a bus ticket, with nothing but a single suitcase of clothes and a few vestiges of his former life. He was able to kick the drink, he said. With the help of his uncle, he lived a curiously simplistic lifestyle. Though the house was wired for electricity, once the night fell, he would throw a large switch in the basement for the breaker, cutting the electricity, and would be in bed not long after, in order to rise with the sun. Only candles and lanterns were permitted for light once the sun went down, and those were precious few. He did not own a computer or a television. In fact, his only means of contact to the outside world was an old-fashioned rotary telephone affixed to its worn wooden box on the wall of the kitchen. You could call his uncle, Carmichael explained, only between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. each afternoon. Otherwise, it would ring and ring on and on for ages. Too many years as a recluse, I thought, Carmichael said. But I was so wrong. Wrong! I was quite taken with the story, and the immenseness that went into the crafting of the tale, as well as the skill of the actor recalling the plethora of details without a cue card in sight. As he spoke, I periodically refilled his coffee cup, and he would take long swigs from it, as if the caffeine, or the warmth of the liquid, was giving him strength to go on. I was overjoyed to be in the presence of such a storyteller. I quickly gave up trying to pester him for his true name or the project that he was working on, for he was committed to his character and would not break it. Thus I poured myself a mug of coffee as well, and simply absorbed the tale. It had taken some time, he said, to adjust to the strangely disconnected way of life. But within a few months, he found he fell asleep easily, shortly after the lights went out, without being kept awake by the whistling of the wind against the windows, or the odd creaks that accompany an older wooden building at night. His uncle had given him a new purpose as well, furnishing him with an old typewriter dug out from the basement, so that he might set about writing an autobiography of his rise to the top and fall afterwards. He had a glimmer of hope, he said, of finding his way to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and making a comeback to the financial world and high society life. He had, in fact, contacted a publishing house that sent him a rather handsome advance for the manuscript, which he had used to purchase a laptop to work on, as opposed to the dusty old typewriter. Shortly afterwards, he said, his uncle had died of a sudden and rather dramatic heart attack one night in the pitch black of the little cabin. He then recounted a tiny funeral attended only by a few members of the local church, and a brief interaction with a lawyer that informed him his uncle had left him the bulk of his meagre estate, little more than the cabin and its belongings, as well as the $3,000 he had managed to squirrel away into the bank. With his uncle gone, a manuscript to deliver, and dreams of a return to his former life spurring him onward, he no longer had a reason to throw the big switch in the basement when the sun dipped below the hills, and he purchased a small flat-screen television with a Netflix subscription by way of keeping himself entertained while working on his laptop late into the night, rising in the afternoons when his body woke him. It was a simple, quiet life, he said, and though he missed his uncle, He enjoyed his time well enough. The cabin began to have issues shortly thereafter, he said, as one might expect from such an old place under the care of a man who knew nothing of tending to a cabin of its age. Lights flickering as circuits became overloaded, faucets making odd gurgling sounds, and shaking violently when washing the dishes. Doors refusing to close properly as their frames swelled with the summer heat, and swinging open at night when they returned to their normal size. It didn't bother him terribly much, he said. He had planned to sell the cabin off once he made his return to New York, and it would be someone else's problem. Until then, he could live with it. No sooner had I decided that there was nothing to fear about the place that I learned how wrong I was. What he had recounted made little sense between the intermittent high-volume shouting and the way the words quickly started tumbling out of his mouth, as though he were suddenly pressed for time, his thoughts too jumbled to keep his story straight, his eyes darting around wildly. He had begun hearing voices, he said, from the attic, singing to him like angels of his work and urging him to work on into the night and through the day, to skip meals and showers in order to complete it. The lights, he said, would begin to flicker, and at times the power would go out for days at a time, forcing him to use the typewriter by candlelight, leaving him to retype his manuscript over and over and over again. And all the while the light of the candles would illuminate less and less of the pages. I had to hand it to him. He was doing a wonderful job of playing the role of a man suffering a severe mental break, as he described the looming existential doubts of failures and dreams never to be obtained, of disasters the world over that were ever present, and of the ceaseless passage of time that slipped away in chunks, first hours, then days, and ultimately weeks at a time without notice. He described the looming darkness that was like shadow spreading over his soul, and the never-ending overstimulation of every sensory input in jumbled, half-formed sentences, as I listened on, slack-jawed, coffee forgot in my hand and gone cold. For it seemed to me, all the while, that as he spoke, his eyes grew brighter and drew me in like a moth to a flame. I wondered idly about electronic contact lenses, and was just about to ask when Carmichael stood up, as if startled, and then sprinted in uneven, almost drunken steps across the diner, the whooshing of the October wind that swirled into the diner with the relentless, tinny sound of that blasted silver bell as it sung on its hook, serving as his goodbye. Bewildered, I leaned through the service window to find Barney asleep in his chair, with a newspaper draped across his lap like a blanket, his favourite position when not working the grill. With a shake of my head at the strangeness of the actors in this city, I cleared away the dishes from the counter and prepared for the few regulars we would be expecting for dinner. That night, I had a lovely, self-rising frozen pizza from the corner shop with pepperoni, bacon, and sausage, while seated in my bright little bubble of warmth, immersed in some wispy, instrumental music, and worked on my manuscript. It did not occur to me how truly strange my life was about to become. As October came and went, and November reared, news of a strange new disease sweeping through parts of Asia started to fill headlines and drove thoughts of the strange man from my mind, replaced instead with reports of high infection rates and airborne pathogens. The disease, they said, spread from person to person easily and had the potential to decimate populations, especially in densely packed areas. I began to dream again of having my own little house, perhaps a cabin in the woods, cut off from the world, to sit and write and weather the storm of this infection. Though, of course, that wouldn't be possible. not with my meagre funds and the small savings that I had been able to scrape together from the diner and odd writing jobs. Life as I had known it changed rapidly. My uniform now included a face mask. A thick plexiglass divider was strung up from the ceiling to hang over the counter. And the diner was more packed than it had ever been, as we were one of the few establishments that remained open. I couldn't argue with the tips either. Even as countless people found themselves out of work, they were more than generous. I ordered a proper pizza one night. Delivery and everything. As the lockdowns came, we of course stayed open through special waivers and precautions, and at night we would shut the world out when returning to my apartment, ignoring the rumours of the mounting death tolls and the mass burning of bodies that were overwhelming morgues all over the city. Needless to say, when the opportunity to get out of the city came, I took it without a second thought. It was December 2nd, and outside my window snow was falling like ash to cover the sidewalks, turning into a dirty sludge as I trudged through it on my way to the diner. The collar of my coat turned up against the soft wind sweeping its way through the buildings. When I opened the door to the diner and was greeted with the familiar tingling of the silver bell and the smell of burnt toast and old coffee, there was a gentleman in a brown suit that matched his cloth face mask and a leather briefcase in his hand. He greeted me instantly, stated that he had urgent business, and we moved to a booth together to handle it. He was a lawyer in charge of George Carmichael's estate. I laughed in his face. The method actor? The lawyer insisted that Mr. Carmichael was never an actor, but a former broker for a large hedge fund in the city before a series of unfortunate events, and had left his estate to one Charlie B. Finnegan, who could be found at this diner. I was in shock and wanted to ask a million questions, but the lawyer was in a hurry, he said, and before long had me signing papers to take possession of one cabin in Vermont, a transfer of $2,431.16 to my bank account, more money than I had ever had at one time, an unsealed envelope with my name written across the front, and a ring of keys that looked as though they had seen more than a little abuse over the years. When it was all said and done, he thanked me and left without a word, leaving me once more bewildered, and with a 12-hour shift ahead, no less. I remember having an odd detachment throughout my shift, and performing my tasks and waiting tables and dealing with patrons with a series of automated responses and motions, as if I were running on autopilot, my mind turning over and over the events of the day. Could this be some sort of elaborate prank? Intense promotion for a movie? All of the paperwork had seemed so official. I had no way to be sure. And all the while I longed to read the letter contained inside the envelope that was safely tucked away in my coat, under the counter. I hurried home the following morning, taking little notice of the smell of the air, nor the quiet that seemed to settle upon the city with a thickening layer of snow. How I wish now that I had taken the time to enjoy it, to revel in the muted silence and the brightness of the streetlights as they glittered and fractured across the flakes of snow. But I took no notice and bolted my apartment door behind me, flinging my wet shoes off, slinging my headphones over my ears while clutching the letter in my free hand, and sat down on my small sofa. The letter was written on a single sheet of slightly crumpled notebook paper, the little fringes where it was torn from its spiral-bound notebook still clinging to the edge, the handwriting a shaky, uneven scroll. It read thus: Charlie, This is a poor way to repay your kindness, but perhaps you'll find that not every tale is just a story. If you hear voices in the attic, run. George Carmichael. So it must be a horror movie, I thought. Like many at the time, the full scope of the illness that was sweeping the globe had not struck me as something that would last beyond the next few months, and clearly the studio did not expect it either. They had an elaborate marketing plan, clearly designed to go viral. While I may end up the laughingstock of their marketing campaign, I had made out, at least as far as I was aware, with a free cabin removed from the city and the disease, as well as money enough to make the trip up there. And so I called the diner that very morning to quit my position and spent the next day packing my few belongings into a rented U-Haul. 12 hours, and more than a couple of wrong turns later, I pulled up a long gravel driveway and saw the cabin for the first time. It was well outside the nearest town, and set back from the road by a long driveway amidst a small clearing of the forest around it. The 2-story cabin had a certain beautiful majesty to it, with its shuttered windows and bright red door. The logs that formed its walls fit together perfectly, without gaps, and at the corners fit together in a sort of cross stack, with some sort of ivory had reclaimed them, climbing its way up and towards the roof. I let myself in after trying several of the keys that had been provided, and reached for a light switch, finding without surprise that there was no power. Using my cell phone as a flashlight, I roamed about the first floor, finding the door to the basement and quickly locating what I sought. A large metal switch with a handle large enough to fit both my hands on it at the same time. A few flakes of red paint clinging to its worn surface, and, with some effort, I was able to lift it into place. Thank you for the tea, Leo. Yum. Immediately after throwing the switch, the lights of the basement came to life, revealing the concrete floor, the large, old wash tub in the corner with lightly rusted metal bracers, and a well-worn wooden workbench that traversed the length of one wall, laden with various hand tools. Smiling to myself, I made my way back upstairs to survey the home that had so luckily become mine. The door to the basement was located to one corner of the small living room, which was illuminated by an almost abrasively bright light on the ceiling, which hung directly over a small coffee table, the surface of which was strewn with papers, some of them crumpled, others in small stacks, all of which appeared to have been typed on an old-fashioned typewriter. I could not make out the words, however, as each page appeared to have been typed, then fed through to be typed over again with different words, several times, so that the letters combined with each other into unintelligible blobs that marred the surface of the sheet. Pages and pages of hand-typed nonsense. I wondered after which poor intern drew the short straw and had to spend countless hours on this little detail. There is a small, threadbare sofa that once must have been green, across from a small flat-screen television on the living room wall, the remote of which was secured to the wall of the television with a bit of Velcro. I have to admit, it was a clever way to never lose the remote. A shame we had never thought of doing so myself. The open floor plan of the cabin had the kitchen partitioned by only a small outcropping of half wall, the top of which formed a sort of counter by which 2 lifted chairs rested, and I imagined eating breakfast there the following morning as I made my way through the cabinets and drawers, locating a number of plates, bowls, cups and utensils, as well as cookware. Scar. I had a very limited collection of dishes myself that I had brought along, but this was more than I could have ever hoped for. There was a gas stove, which I wasn't too familiar with. We had always used an electric stove, but I felt certain that I had figured out. Heat is heat, after all. And of course, affixed to the wall, in its little wooden frame, was a rotary phone with an old receiver. It struck me as odd for a moment. There was no refrigerator, just a large, heavy, old-fashioned icebox, and I laughed out loud to no one about how no details seemed to be overlooked by whatever production crew was in charge of furnishing this place, and hoped they wouldn't be disappointed when I ordered a refrigerator, assuming that I would be able to find one that I could afford. It was then that I wondered for the first time if the cabin had been rigged with cameras or microphones, so that whoever was behind this could utilise the footage for their movie trailer, or something similar. I spent the next half hour or so looking for any signs of surveillance on the main floor, in the living room, kitchen, and small bathroom, before moving upstairs to continue the search in the 2 bedrooms, small office, and a larger bathroom. Finding nothing, I ventured up the rickety stairs, pulled from the ceiling to the attic. Again, I found nothing to suggest that there was a film crew watching my every move. In fact, the attic was entirely empty, save for a dusty old typewriter with its stiff brass keys. Poor intern, I thought aloud, to no one in particular, as I carried it down the stairs and placed it on the desk of the office. If Carmichael had been using the typewriter for those pages downstairs, it wouldn't have this much dust on it. Good try, though. I spent the rest of the day moving in my few items, returning the U-Haul to the nearest drop-off location, and then taking a very expensive taxi ride back to the cabin. By the time I returned that night, I was exhausted, and ended up falling asleep with ease on the hard sofa shortly after sundown. The next morning, I ventured upstairs for a shower. The water pressure was terrible, and it took ages to find the proper temperature, but I was glad that there was running water. I fixed myself a small breakfast of oatmeal, an interesting endeavour for someone who had only ever used a microwave for oatmeal, and set about looking for a small refrigerator. Around noon, it had been sorted out, and a second-hand refrigerator would be delivered the following day from a local outlet. I would need a job, of course, in order to afford food and electricity and internet and such, but I had savings enough, thanks to the generous donation of George Carmichael, to worry about that in a few days, after I had settled in. Besides, I had my meagre royalties from my books and ghostwriting besides that. I might not even need to take a job now that I didn't need to pay rent anymore. It was with this thought that I settled myself onto the sofa and absorbed myself in my own manuscript. I was startled out of my work by the ringing of the phone in the kitchen, a loud, echoing sound that reverberated through the whole cabin, bouncing off the walls like thunder. As I crossed to the kitchen, wondering who it could be, I noted that the clock on the wall said it was 3 p.m. I had been absorbed in my work for longer than I had realised. I lifted the receiver to my ear, noting how heavy it was in my hand. "Ah, hello. You must be Charlie B. Finnegan," said the female voice on the other end. "Yes, I'm Charlie. Who is this, please?" "My name is Nancy Halmaker. I'm one of the publishing agents at Nondescript Publishing House. I worked with George Carmichael before his untimely demise." "Oh," I said simply. "It's, nice to meet you." I didn't know how to respond to that, but fortunately I didn't need to. as she quickly pressed on and got to the point of her call. George told me that you were a writer and that I should check out your work. I actually just finished Lights Over the Bay and I love your imagery. I don't know if you're working with an agent or have plans for another work, but I would love to sign you with an advance. I was taken aback. The man from the diner had looked into me and set up a book deal for me? My worries over money were potentially over, forever. Little did I know how right I was. I spent an hour on the phone with Nancy, discussing details and emailing her over the first few chapters of the manuscript that we had been working on. When we hung up, I was pleased as punch and expecting an email of documents from her to sign off on, as well as a sizable advance on the book sales. Everything was coming up Charlie. A few weeks later, I was settled in, and with more comfort and security than we had ever known. No bills hanging over my head, no 12-hour shifts, no more endless boxes of 99-cent macaroni and cheese from the corner store by the diner. I would wake up with the sun in the morning, attend to the ever-present removal of dirt, dust, and grime that seemed to accumulate in the house, and work in solitude, in my own little space in the world, bothered by no one, with the lilting music of violins and orchestras filling the rooms from the little television. It wasn't long before I stopped charging my cell phone and let the bill lapse into disconnection. So happy was I with my little sanctuary away from the world. I'd work on my manuscript into the evening and tuck myself into bed when I was tired at night, without a care in the world. I soon grew used to the creaking and groaning of the old cabin. After a few nights, I had been convinced that we had heard someone walking up the stairs. Lace flower birds, nothing more, I soon discovered, and before too long, I had settled into a nice little routine. February came and went, and as early March brought with it a slightly warmer temperature, and the icicles that hung from the roof could be seen dripping slowly with the afternoon sun, I received word from Nancy from the publishing house. The world was in the grips of what had become a fully blown pandemic, and the need for entertainment was greater than ever before. My manuscript, she said, had a real chance of becoming a bestseller if we could publish it by the end of April. Excited, we agreed to the rushed timeline. After all, I had little to fill my days besides enjoying my world in my own little bubble as the rest of the world passed me by, and I had made a lot of progress. Surely I could deliver. All it would take was a few late nights and a little of that hard work ethic that I had left behind in New York. And so I moved from the living room with the television up to the office, setting up my laptop on the desk next to the typewriter, and got to it. I remember the first night in the office, hard at work into the wee hours of the morning, when the power switched off unexpectedly, plunging me into darkness, save for the light from my laptop screen as it swapped over to battery power. Without a flashlight, or my cell phone, which hadn't been used in ages, I carried the computer with me down to the basement to hunt for a fuse box, assuming that one must have blown. I found no fuse box, only the same handle that controlled all the power of the house. It was in the down position, apparently having been switched off by an overloaded circuit. Placing the laptop on the ground by my feet, I struggled to push the heavy switch back into place with both hands, but finally managed it, and, realising it was nearly 4 AM, decided to head to bed. I had slept through the day, unaccustomed to the late nights, and woke up as the sun was setting. Fortunately enough for me, I wasn't beholden to any set schedule, and, after a quick meal, got back to work. I sat down with my manuscript. I found that I'd unintentionally repeated the last few paragraphs, no doubt owing to having been too tired to remember where I was. I took no notice and got back to work, speeding through progress through the night, and becoming very annoyed when once more, just after 3:50 AM, the power to the cabin switched off. This became a habit, a schedule of sorts. I would wake late in the day after being up too late, work into the night until the light switched off, and take that as my cue to go to bed. Thank you for the tea, Sanchez. We appreciate it. I had taken to keeping a flashlight on my desk for my nightly trek to the basement, but as the cheap batteries seemed to work for only a night or two, I finally replaced it with a jarred candle, and then gave up going down there altogether, instead starting my morning with throwing the switch. I don't know how long this went on, but at some point, when the power to the house would switch off, I would jokingly call out to the empty house with a "Thank you, George, I'll go to bed," or a "5 more minutes, George, come on." It seemed only fitting somehow, despite the fact that I knew I was alone. I don't believe in ghosts, of course, and knew well enough that it was likely power surges in the middle of the night were too much for the old circuitry to handle. It was oddly comforting, in my self-imposed isolation, to talk to George throughout the day, and I would as I was fixing meals or taking a shower or working late into the night in a frenzy to complete my manuscript. At times, I even fancied that he would answer back, in that strange, half-shouting, half-whispering voice that I had heard in the diner, though it was always far off, as I hear upstairs while I was in the kitchen, or outside the office door when I was at work. I delivered my completed manuscript with a sigh of relief, the night just before the new deadline, and closed my laptop before the lights went out, looking forward to the comfort of my bed and a long sleep before the return to a normal schedule. But I was woken only a few hours later by the harsh and resounding ringing of the phone in the kitchen at 9 AM. I shuffled my way downstairs, squinting my eyes against the morning light that streamed appraisively through the windows, and answered the phone. "Hello?" Silence was my only answer. Annoyed, I tried again. "Hello? Who is this?" Finally, there was a soft clicking sound, and the voice on the other end of the phone finally came through. It was Nancy, though her voice sounded far away, as if it were coming down a long tunnel, and strangely distorted in such a way that I could only make out every couple of words or so.
"Charlie, I got your manuscript. Too little, too late. Last April's release date. Can't make out what this is supposed to be."
I hung up the phone and shook my head, trying to clear it of the distorted sound that I could still hear, and trudged back to the bed, convinced that I must be having a weird dream. I would call her tomorrow to confirm that she had received my manuscript. I tossed and turned in bed for hours, the strange sounds of distorted voices down a long tunnel filling my ears before I finally slipped into unconsciousness. When I woke again, the moon had already risen over the trees outside my window. So much for setting my sleep schedule. And I called out to the house, as I had grown into the habit of doing. "Why didn't you wake me up, George?" I shuffled my way to the basement to throw the switch, and then headed to the kitchen after some food, my head foggy with the memory of the strange sounds that had filled my ears. Turning on the kitchen lights was a mistake. I cried out and closed my eyes as my vision went black for a moment, and my head felt like it would crack in two, the whooshing, distorted sounds in my ears flaring back to life. Great. And migraine. I heated up a can of soup in the darkness, aside from the soft glow of the gas flames on the burner. Sipped it slowly while seated on the sofa, not daring to turn on the television, and cursing myself quietly for not having any headache medication in the house. I wasn't prone to headaches, and my medicine cabinet was always rather bare. Even over-the-counter medications cost money, and for a long time, I was severely lacking in funds. I curled up on the sofa with a blanket that I kept there, and resolved to head into town in the morning for some meds if the migraine was not alleviated by more sleep. When I awoke the next day, the light was still blinding, and I squinted as I made my way upstairs to my laptop, telling George that switch in the basement had better be on, so I could order a cab to the store. The strange whooshing in my ears now seemed to me to be a cacophony of rasping voices, all talking over each other, impossible to distinguish one sentence from another, and the sensitivity to light was leaving swirling black spots in my vision, like mist crowding over my eyes, that would drift about like clouds in the sky. I searched quickly for migraine symptoms. Yep, as I thought, auditory and visual hallucinations. Once it had progressed to this point, it was better that I saw a doctor, rather than attempt to treat it with over-the-counter medications. And so I ordered a cab through the website, dragged shoes on my feet, and stumbled my way out the door. I felt bad for the cab driver. He looked understandably shocked when I shouted directions at him, unable to hear myself speaking over the sound in my ears. Shouting, I decided, was a terrible way to communicate, as it made my head throb all that much more. I must have collapsed on my way to the hospital, for when I awoke I was on an inclined hospital bed, with doctors standing over me, the voices in my ears louder than ever, the bright lights searing my eyes, and I was grateful for the black wisps that coalesced through my vision. Blood tests, dehydration, arrhythmia, psychosis, schizophrenia, narcolepsy. The words passed through the voices in my ears during various bouts of consciousness, and the complete darkness and peace that was unconscious. I recall one doctor, young, handsome, with a smile that probably sent the nurses swooning through the drifting bits of vision that I had, talking to me gently, though I could barely make out his voice through the haze of the never-ending voices. "I'm not mad," I insisted. "Please! It's just a migraine. It hurts!" My throat hurt from being so dry, and I choked on the words like shards of glass before drifting back to the darkness, a peaceful serenity of unconsciousness. Medications, therapy, release. All of it's pointless and meaningless as the voices and the loss of vision continued, and the painfulness of the bright lights, the clipped conversations. I just want sleep. Turn the lights out. Freedom, help me! Keep the light of day. The future repeats itself. There is no end to be found. Don't answer the phone in the morning. All I wanted was my own little world. Don't you understand? If you hear voices in the attic, run. They tell me today is September 27th, 2021. That can't be right. I know that is April 30th, 2020. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to fight against the darkness. The swirling shadows that once seemed to be so far away, but now twist and whip across my vision, close enough to snuff out all of the light that my weary and bloodshot eyes might take in. I don't know even if I'll have time enough to finish telling this tale before my time runs out. It's not as if there's a ticking clock that marks the passage of time, or gives me clear warning of how many more times my heart might beat before it stills at last. There's only my laptop, sitting at 5% battery life, the ever-curling smoke-like wisps of anti-light, and the ever-present whispers that fill my ears. There we go! There we go, chat! What did you think? What did you guys think? Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the story? Let me catch up a bit with some of this chat here. Darth, there's always time for tea. Indeed, there is. Thank you. Jim. Thank you so much. Alright, let me catch up with some of this chat here. I want to see what you guys are doing. By the way, thank you, Mondo, for that raid. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Hello, Main Love, Wolf and Waffles, and Leo26718 for those follows. Really appreciate it. Let's see. The stuff spices. I like it. That certainly went downhill fast. Yeah, it did. It absolutely did. Also, if someone named Nancy calls you on an old rotary phone, don't comply. That was epic. Well, thank you, Sanchez. Thank you. Mundo, you weren't around for all of it, but it sounded great for what you heard. Well, thank you, Mundo. For those of you that, if you came in at any point during the story, if you missed the beginning, if you'd like to just read through it again, I did actually post this one on r/creepypasta myself today, so it is there if you care to go and look at it, if you just wanted to read through it again, or if you'd like to see what you missed. Alright, one last pun before we end. One of my friends let bread go extremely stale and then carved shoes out of it. I asked him what he was doing and he said he was making loafers. I think he took it too literally. Oh my gosh. Well done with that pun. Very well done. Let me turn on our channel. Let me turn those redeems back on for you guys, so that you can have them. I know. It must have been absolute torture for you not to be able to pop off the run command during the tale. You must have been going insane. You might even get it read by someone like Mr. Creepypasta Jr. Well, funnily enough, Half-Cricketrin, I have no desire to have my stories read by anyone else in such a fashion. I'm kind of writing them in order to be able to perform them for you guys, for Morbidity and Mythos Mondays, and of course, for those of you that missed the announcement, for the soon-to-launch Morbidity and Mythos podcast that I am working on, that I am looking to launch for the end of October. And this story will definitely be one of the ones that are on there, along with a few others. It might not be there when we first start, but there it is. And as we're coming up to the spooky month, I have an announcement for you guys. Normally, we do Morbidity and Mythos Mondays every other Monday, but for the entire month of October, we're going to do Morbidity and Mythos Mondays. The whole month. We're going to do some of them. They might be original tales if I'm able to get them written in time. They might be public domain stories. They might be stories that were submitted by you guys. It's all going to depend, but we are going to do this every Monday. Hello, Stylus! Greetings, Hairdolemaker. It's been a long time since I've seen you. You just missed our spooky tale. You just missed it. But welcome in, it's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I really and truly do. And Iro, don't worry that you missed the story. Iro has one queued up for you with a familiarity. Alright, Iro, I shall tell you that old familiar tale from my childhood. We'll do it. We'll do the familiarity. Ahem. Ahem. I'll tell you a story about Jack and McGurry, and now my story's begun. I'll tell you another about Jack and his brother, and now my story's all done. There you go. There you go, Hiro. I hope it's everything you always wanted. Yes, it is in fact the same story every time. It never changes. Never changes. That's right. That's right. One story was apparently not good enough. Not good enough. You love my stories. Well, thank you. Thank you. I am glad that you guys enjoyed it. I really am. I worked pretty hard on that. So I'm glad that it was fun for you. Alright, you guys. So, schedule this week. You can see it here on the screen. Of course, today was Morbidity and Mythos Monday. However, I have a collab tonight. After the stream, just like last Monday, I will be heading on over to the radio room to go and hang out with Mr. Rogan Breaker here. Funder, thank you. Thank you so much for that frivolity. Thank you. Do you get anything from frivolities, or is it just something that people who cannot afford to use bits can use to cheer? Like, I don't get anything, like, financially or anything like that from frivolity. I do get, you know, the sincere feeling from you guys. They really do mean a lot to me. It's strictly just to give you a way to cheer with channel points, in case you cannot afford bits or subs or anything like that, and you felt like showing me some support. So, tonight we'll be going over to the radio room to continue our playthrough of Opus Echo of Starsong. Should be a blast. We had a great time last time. And for those of you wondering, yes, I am going to be taking the machine again. He's assured me that it's properly calibrated this time, but then again, he said that last time, didn't he? Well, we'll see how that goes. Should be fun. So that is tonight. Don't worry about missing it. Go live notifications will go out on the Discord for you. And what? Thunder. Oh, Thunder, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for those 5 gifted subs. You are so generous. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you. Just want you to know, if you become a plushie again, I am breaking out the squeaky mallet. Well, hopefully not. Everything will be alright. Oh, you think? Oh, I hope. That machine. I could have just taken the damn tree. But no, we have to use the machine pay. Tuesday, of course, we have our creator workshops, which is Tuesday Tea. Those are hosted on YouTube. If you'd like to come out, if you are a content creator yourself or you're a streamer yourself, if you need some advice, need some help, feel free to drop by. But also, if you have advice to give, please feel free to stop by and share what is working for you, what's not working for you, so we can get around each other and support each other, because nobody gets anywhere alone. And tomorrow's workshop is going to be all about working with artists. So we're going to have a lovely chat all about the joys and pitfalls of working with artists. Wednesday, of course, we have our What's Good Wednesday, our weekly dose of positivity that we always have to have, right? Can't have a week without that. That'll be on Wednesday, followed by some more Life is Strange. Things are really starting to heat up in this game, and I am quite excited to figure out what is going on. Are we ever going to figure out what happened to Rachel? Don't know. Thursday, we will be heading on over to the Shadowverse once again to continue on with our playthrough of Unravel with the Inverted Shadow himself at 7 PM. And then Friday night, of course, is our community night with some community games and some fun. And, of course, Friday night after community night, directly after community night, is that movie night, that community goal movie night that was split between the Inverted Shadow and I for that movie night on the Discord with myself and the Inverted Shadow. So that is coming up this Friday, and I am super excited to finally let you guys know. For those of you that don't know already, we are going to be watching Jimmy Neutron by Genius. It should be a lot of fun. Especially with someone like the Inverted Shadow, with just all of the experience that he has in animation. Watching animated movies with the Inverted Shadow is an experience unlike any other. Not to mention, the movie itself is fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. So I look forward to watching it all with you guys. And so that is it, you guys. That is our week coming up, and I'm excited for it. I am going to say we're going to finish off the stream here tonight, just because, well, my voice is going out just a little bit and needs some tea after our very long story tonight, and I have broken stream, so hopefully I shall see you all over there a bit later on tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate it. Let's see if we can get our credits to run for us today. Let's see if we can get them to run. As always, from the bottom of my little fee heart, thank you everyone for being here and for giving me your time. It is the most beautiful thing that you guys can ever give me, all of your love and support. Thank you so much to our murder shovel wielders who keep this place running. Thank you for the raids, thank you for the house, thank you for the gifted subs, the resubscriptions, for everyone that threw the shiny things. We're not throwing tiny around, unless I find out she has been running that black market of seeds. But thank you guys so much. I really and truly appreciate you. And since we were all in a bit of a spooky mood, I think, after that tale, let's go and trade someone playing a spooky game. Let's go raid someone playing a spooky game. It's going to be someone we don't know, someone I have not met before, but let's try it out anyway. Let's try it out anyway. Let's see if we could find a good one. Let's find a good one and just make sure that they're not on followers only, because we don't like that. And they're not. And they're not. So you guys, this person is making their way towards affiliate. They are 10 follows away from their affiliate numbers. Let's see if we could push them over that mark. Let's see if we could push them over that mark. So thank you guys. Let's show some of that positivity when we get over there, and we shall see you later tonight. If I don't, I'll see you for tea. And until next time, when the grove door opens, hi, I'm Paegan O'Ceallaigh. May harmony find you.